We have to thank the last speaker for doing quite a good justice to the topic he has been asked to treat. May God enrich his knowledge to give us more of such research. Now I call on, we are going to the last lecture for today, which reads, Lecture 5, captioned Accumulation of Weapons of Mass Destruction and Quest for World Peace. Our facilitator is Dr. Mudassir Ahmad Sahib. Dr. Mudassir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Respected Chairman Sahib, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. As Chairman Sahib have just announced, the topic of this lecture is accumulation of weapons of mass destruction and quest for peace. We are living in the age that peace is required more than any other time in the history of mankind. There is no place on the earth that can be considered peaceful where man is living without any fear. We have witnessed some horrible incidents in the past which resulted in people being killed to the extent that their bodies could not be identified. It is estimated that 60 to 85 million people died in World War II. Some estimates say that about 4% of the whole population of the earth was killed in that deadliest conflict. When nuclear weapons were used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, 240,000 people died in only those 2 days. And aftermaths of those nuclear weapons are still being faced by the people of those areas in the form of genetic malformations and handicapped children. After the World War II, the victorious nations decided to bring peace in the world. And in 1945, United Nations were created following World War II to prevent another such conflict. The Charter of the United Nations starts with the following beautiful words. Please listen this statement carefully and just think the history of last 68 years, that those promises that were made, how really they were fulfilled. The Charter of the United Nations starts with these words. We, the people of United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom, and for these ends, to practice tolerance and to live together in peace with one another as good neighbors, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security, and to ensure by the acceptance of principles and the institutions of methods that armed forces shall not be used, save in the common interest, and to employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all people, have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims. This is just the first paragraph of the Charter of United Nations. And this shows that maybe from now on, the world will be heaven on earth. Everywhere we will see happiness, prosperity for everyone, equal rights and opportunities. But what actually happened is different. There is no part on the earth, Asia or Africa, Europe or America, that wars and conflicts are not on rise. World has witnessed about 120 wars. The world has witnessed about 120 wars from 1945 to 2010. And this figure is the official figures that some countries have given. Unofficial wars and conflicts are out of that. And these wars like Indochina War, Arab-Israel War, Korean War, Vietnam War, Pakistan-India War, Afghanistan War, Iran-Iraq War, US-Iraq War, and so many others. And an estimated 51 million people have been killed in wars between 1945 to 2000. Almost a third of these deaths are amongst the population of China, Vietnam, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Sudan suffered the highest number of war deaths during this period. No part of the world has escaped the scourge of war. There is nowhere that modern weapons or armies cannot reach. Anywhere in the world, you can find people who will use guns to get their own way. From under the ocean, a missile can fly out beyond the atmosphere and come down to destroy a city on the other side of the world, while a tiny butterfly-like object, which is called an anti-personal mine, can blow up the child who picks it up thinking it is a toy. The destructive power of the weapons have grown enormously during the 20th century. Unfortunately, people's ability to resolve conflicts has not made the same stride. Nuclear weapons that were used twice in the course of warfare, both times by United States near the end of the World War II, on 6th August 1945, a uranium gun-type fission bomb, coded name Little Boy, was detonated over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, on 9th August, a plutonium implosion-type fission bomb coded name Fat Man was exploded over Nagasaki, Japan, and these two bombings resulted in the death of approximately 240 people, mostly civilians, from acute injuries sustained from the explosion. These nuclear weapons, named Little Boy and Fat Man, were capable of producing 12 to 34 kilowatt of TNT. Actually, this is the unit through which it is measured that how destructive this weapon is. So that time, 68 years ago, those bombs that were dropped on Japanese city, they were just capable of producing 12 to 34 kilowatts of TNT. But today's weapon, like for example, Russians have a nuclear bomb which is called Tsar Bomba. It can produce 57,000 kiloton of TNT. Compare with the 12 to 13 of that time, and now it is 57,000 kiloton, which is about 2,500 times more powerful than used by US in the Japan. You can't imagine what type of destruction will come if this nuclear weapon is used today. It is estimated that there are about 17,000 nuclear warheads owned by 8 countries of the world now. And this is the figure that those countries has officially declared. Unofficial are more than that. And even some estimates says that the world has about 68,000 nuclear warheads. And this is just one part of that horrific story. Expenditures on defense has also grown steadily. But despite this massive increase, most people don't feel much more secure. Wars have not brought peace. The desire to invent ever more effective weapons to defend or to deter has absorbed an ever-growing amount of money. But it has done nothing to prevent wars. What has happened is that the weapons are indeed more expensive and more destructive. But resources for things that people really need, such as adequate health services or easy access to clean water in many parts of the third world, have been reduced. In some parts of the world, military expenditures has itself become the source of conflict. Scarce sources are used to buy weapons and maintain the armed forces, while much of the population lives in appalling poverty. The nature of the warfare has also changed. From the set piece battles of the earlier centuries, the blood and mud of the trenches in the First World War, and fast-moving mechanized battlefield of the World War II, to high-tech surgical computer-guided action in Iraq and Kuwait, war, as seen through our television screens, appear to have become a well-ordered, almost bloodless affair. The means of today's wars include aerial bombardment, poison gas, and even chemical weapons. And there is also the potential use of the most horrific weapons of all, the nuclear bomb. Consequently, the war of today are entirely different to those of the past, because today's war could potentially wipe mankind from the face of the earth. During the 20th century, the proportion of civilian casualty has risen steadily. In World War II, 2/3 of those killed were civilian. By the beginning of 1990s, civilian deaths approached a horrifying 90%. This is partly the result of the technological development, but there is another major reason. During the 20th century, many modern armed conflicts are not between states, but within themselves. Struggles between soldiers and civilians, or between competing civilian groups. Such conflicts are likely to be fought out in country, villages, and urban streets. In such wars, the enemy camp is everywhere, and the distinction between combatant and non-combatant melt away into the fear, suspicion, confusion of the civilian life under fire. Many contemporary struggles are between different ethnic groups in the same country or in the former states. When ethnic loyalties rule, other moral codes are often abandoned. It becomes horribly easy to proceed from neighborhood hostilities to ethnic cleansing and genocide. After that, killing adults is not enough. future generations of the enemy, that is their children, must also be eliminated. Women and children are not just caught in the crossfire, they become targets as well. As one political commentator put it, that is in 1994 broadcast, before violence erupted in Rwanda, to kill the big rats, you have to kill the little rats. That is to mention to their children that don't kill only adults, kill their children as well. Behind many of today's armed conflicts lies a long history of wars which ended, maybe, with winners and losers, but rarely with solutions to the problems which caused war in the first place. Unfortunately, the high hopes from UN could not be fulfilled. As League of Nations failed to bring peace in World War after World War I, which ultimately resulted in World War II, which was more destructive and engulfed more countries than First World War. After World War II, now hopes of peace are fading very fast. The simple reason is the lack of justice, which was promised in the Charter of UN. The equality and justice, which was promised in the beginning, was shattered when 5 powerful countries were given veto power. It means if anything is contrary to interest of those nations or to their friends' interest, they will not agree to it. And this has actually happened, and it is still happening. When we see the history of veto, it was used 219 times from 1945 to 2012. In all those conflicts and in wars in which these major powers were involved, UN could not stop them from those wars because of veto power. The Security Council could at best have a limited role in certain wars and interventions in which its permanent members were involved. For example, in Algeria, Suez, Hungary, Vietnam, Sino-Vietnamese War, Afghanistan, Panama, Iraq, Georgia. Are we still going to believe that this UN Charter or this Security Council will bring peace with same strategies and actions which have proved wrong? The question arises, what will bring peace? Is there no hope? Or we are on the mercy of these nations? Or there is some hope? And is there any possibility that world is going to see any day peace everywhere? Yes, there is a hope. But this hope is at all levels. This hope is not on an international level. This hope is at our individual levels, at our family levels, at our community levels, at our country levels, and ultimately at international level. Holy Quran have given 5 beautiful principles. And if we, as I have just mentioned, at every level, either it is individual level or a country level, if we follow these principles of the Holy Quran, there is going to be definitely a peace. And this is what our beloved Imam, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasrul Aziz, in his last 10 years of Khilafat, is trying his best to reach each and every corner of the earth, to reach every type of the people, politicians, religious leaders, and he has been telling them that these are the rules. If world will not listen to them and they will not adopt these rules, there is not going to be any peace. But if we adopt them, definitely one day all of us will live in peace. So the first principle is that Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qiste shuhada lillahi walau ala anfusikum awil walidaini wal aqrabina an yakun ghaniyan aw faqiran fallahu awla bihima fala tattabi'ul hawa an tadilu وَإِن تَلْؤُوا أَوْ تُعْرِضُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا. Chapter 4, verse 136. O ye who believe, be strict in observing justice, and be witness for Allah, even though it be against yourself or against parents and kindred, whether he be rich or poor. Allah is most regardful of them both than you are. Therefore, follow not low desires, that you may be able to act equitably. And if you conceal the truth or evade it, then remember that Allah is well aware of what you do. Then Allah Almighty says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kunu qawwamina lillahi shuhada'a bil qisti wala yajrimannakum shananu qawmin ala Allah tahdilu ihdilu huwa aqrabu littaqwa wattaqullah innallaha khabirum bima ta'malun. Chapter 5, verse 9. O ye who believe, be steadfast in the cause of Allah, bring witness in equity, and let not a people's enmity incite you to act otherwise than with justice. Be always just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Allah is aware of what you do. Ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min zakarin wa unsa waj'alnakum shu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum innallaha alimun khabir. Chapter 49, verse 14. O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female, and we have made you into tribes and sub-tribes, that you may recognize one another. Verily, the most honorable among you in the sight of Allah is he who is the most righteous among you. Surely, Allah is all known, all knowing, all aware. So these verses very clearly guide the mankind to maintain absolute justice everywhere and every time, irrespective of your relations to the parties. Had this principle of justice been adopted, the Arab-Israel conflict, India-Pakistan conflict of Kashmir, and many others like, which are a big threat to world peace, had been solved long ago. But as long as veto power is given to some countries, it means all countries are not equal. Rather, some are superior to the others. And if this principle is not incorporated into the UN Charter, as Hazur has mentioned many times, even when he wrote letters to the head of the state, he mentioned that this veto power given to 5 countries is the biggest injustice. And it has to be removed. If it is not removed, world will not see peace anywhere. Second principle that Allah Almighty have given us, Wala tamuddanna ayneka illa ma mata'ana bihi azwajam minhum zahratal hayati dunya le naftinahum fihe wa rizqu rabbika khairum wa abqa. Chapter 20, verse 32. And strain not thy eyes after what we have bestowed on some classes of them to enjoy for a short time the splendor of the present world, that we may try them thereby, and the provision of thy Lord is better and more lasting. Then another place Allah Almighty says, La tumudunna ayneka illa ma mata'ana bihi azwajam minhum wa la tahzan alayhim wakhfiz janahaka lil mu'minin. Chapter 15, verse 89. Stretch not thy eyes towards and what we have bestowed on some classes of them to enjoy for a short time, and grieve not over them. Many wars and conflicts have no any other reason than to gain access to resources of other countries. One speaker this morning, earlier, he mentioned some examples that all the recent wars of Iraq and Libya and some other countries how the Western powers and the superpowers of the world attack those countries, how to share their resources. And this is what Allah Almighty have mentioned, that we should not look on what God have given to the others. And it applies everywhere, even in the families, even at the individual basis, even at the community levels and countries so forth. When Russia invaded Afghanistan in early 80s and later US started war to liberate them, was only for resources. When US attacked Iraq because he has weapons of mass destruction, ultimately it proved that it was only to get oil wealth. They couldn't find any weapon of mass destruction there. And when Libya was granted so-called freedom from a dictator with the help of Western powers, it was again the resources of those countries. It is a long history. Those of you who are aware, they can go through the reports and they can find out that how different Western companies were granted contracts in those countries that first they destroyed. First they destroyed those countries and gave them the bill that this is the amount that we have spent to liberate you. And during those bombardments, all those destructions which took place, then they charge for second time that give us money that we reconstruct for you. And this is what Dajjal is. This is how they take the resources, and this is what Allah Almighty have mentioned us. Because of the shortage of time, I will not go into the detail. I just outline the principles. The third principle is sanctity of human life. Allah Almighty says, Man qatala nafsam bighayri nafsin aw fasadin fil arzi faka'annama qatala an-nasa jami'a wa man ahya faka'annama ahya an-nasa jami'a. Chapter 5, verse 33. Whosoever killed a person, unless it be for killing a person or for creating disorder in the land, it shall be if he had killed all mankind. And whoso gave life to one, it shall be as if he had given life to all mankind. See what a beautiful principle. It did not mention that it is the life of a Jew or a Christian or a Hindu or East or West or black or white. Allah say any life. So this is the sanctity of life. But we see that in some countries, when they do aerial bombardments, they throw drones and kill innocent people. They don't bother for a single life. But when it happens to their own people, they take revenge for even one person. Allah Almighty has said that all human beings are equal. White is not superior to black, or the life of people in the West is more precious than in the East. But what we observe, that some powerful countries have the right to kill innocent people in the name of preemptive strikes, or to kill civilians by drones, only on the suspicion of being enemy. If this injustice is not removed, how we can expect peace in the world? Fourth beautiful principle mentioned in the Holy Quran is وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا فَإِن بَغَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبْغِي حَتَّى تَفِيَّ إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ فَإِن فَاءَتْ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا بِالْعَدْلِ وَأَقْسِطُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. Chapter 49, verse 10. And if two parties of believers fight against each other, make peace between them. Then, if after that one of them transgresses against the other, fight the party that transgresses until it returns to the command of Allah. Then, if it returns, make peace between them with equality and act justly. Verily, Allah loves the just. Our beloved Imam, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz, explained this verse very beautifully in one of his lectures. And Hazur said, in order to maintain peace, it has been explained that the outset that the foremost requirement is justice. And despite abiding by the principle of justice, if efforts to make peace are unsuccessful, He says, and despite abiding by the principle of justice, if efforts to make peace are unsuccessful, then unite and fight collectively against the party that has transgressed, and continue until such a time that the transgressing party is ready to make peace. Once transgressing party is ready to make peace, the requirement of justice is, don't seek revenge, don't impose restrictions or embargoes. By all means, keep an eye on the transgressor, but at the same time, try and improve this situation. Lastly, the fifth principle is, وَلَا تُسُبُّ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّ اللَّهَ عَدُوًّا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ كَذَلِكَ زَيَّنَا لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ عَمَلَهُمْ ثُمَّ إِلَى رَبِّهِمْ مَرْجِعُهُمْ فَيُنَبِّئُهُم بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Chapter 6, verse 109. And revile not those whom they call upon beside Allah, lest they, out of spite, revile Allah in their ignorance. Thus, unto every people we have caused their doing to seem fair. Then unto them, unto their Lord is their return, and we will inform them of what they used to do. Another major reason for conflicts is not showing respect to the holy people and leaders of the others. Many a time, especially in the Western world, it is called freedom of speech. When filthy language is used for some leaders who are respected by others and considered holy, time does not allow me to elaborate on these issues. Our beloved leader, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad Ayyadullah Ta'ala, has given some many lectures and sermons on the topic of peace in last 10 years that no any other world leader has done. He is a real ambassador of peace. He wrote letters to world leaders who have some influence on world politics. It is because of his prayers and efforts that many a time in last few years the many wars were averted. This Jalsa is another example of this effort to bring peace in the world. But to achieve this goal, every one of us has to struggle. The word peace will be achieved when there is peace in every country, and every country will get peace when all cities and communities are at peace. And any community cannot have peace until each individual has peace of mind. So this journey starts from individual. Individual peace can only be attained by remembrance of Allah and following all the commandments of Allah. Let us make a promise that every one of us will be a symbol of peace, whether at home or at work, alone or in groups. Only those societies and communities prosper who fight for the rights of others, not for their own. May Allah Almighty enable me and all of you to be real symbols of peace, like our beloved Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa akhiru dawana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum.